I'm the government skills specialist here at Scenic View. That means I help people get on benefits, and then I help people stay on benefits once they are on. Oh, there's an echo. So I'll start. So first of all, I made a slide to tell you why benefits. So currently, the minimum wage in Utah is $7.25 an hour. And we have a few students who are working minimum wage. I'd say more students are working at like $9 to $10 an hour, which is still not very much. But if you times $7.25 by 20 hours a week, you get 145. 4 weeks a month is 580. The cheapest studio apartment I could find in Provo was $650. So they're already almost $100 short. Is that 7? I don't know. I'm not very good at math if I don't have a calculator in front of me, but that's a lot of money. The USDA estimate for a monthly food bill per person here in Utah is $186 to $242. So if you add everything together, that's $836 at least that someone needs to live, and that would make you short $256. So that's why we're getting a lot of our students on benefits, is because they either can't work or they can only work a part-time job that only pays them very little. There are different programs. So all the programs I'm going to talk about should be treated as individual programs, because even though some of them are all under the same administration, they have different rules. Also, you should never assume that they are talking to each other, because the only time they are ever really talking to each other is when it will not benefit you. When it does benefit you, they're almost never letting each other know what's going on. So here are some of the programs that I'll talk about. I talk about Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, which is for those who don't have enough work on their record or their parents' record to qualify for SSDI. SSDI is for those who have put in enough, they call them quarters. When you work a certain amount and earn a certain amount, you earn something called a quarter. If you pay that into Social Security, and once you get enough quarters for your age, you can qualify for SSDI, which is disability insurance, which is a really important kind of distinction to make. Disability insurance meaning you are insured in case of disability. It's more the traditional Social Security that people think of. It's more of what you receive when you age past retirement. Medicaid comes with SSI, but sometimes it can be used to help for Medicare, which comes with SSDI. Medicaid is essentially free. Medicare comes with SSDI, and I'll go over all of this again because I know it's incredibly complicated, and I've got some charts and things that'll kind of show and make it more visual. Medicare comes with SSDI after you've had SSDI for 24 months. There are food stamps, which in Utah are called SNAP. It's basically a debit card that you use to purchase certain sorts of food items. And then housing vouchers are, as far as I understand, pretty simple. I'm actually not over housing vouchers. Our off-campus housing specialist is. But it makes it so a person only pays 30% of their total income as rent. Their income is counted as anything that they're receiving from their parents, from the government, from the church, and from work. And it can go up and down as their income goes up and down. So I got a question about DSPD, or Division of Services for People with Disabilities. And I wanted to mention that because I have the horrible news that I can't tell you very much about it. Except that if you want to get on it, you need to get on the waiting list right now, especially if your child is not severely disabled. So people who have more severe disabilities, I understand, move up the list faster, but people with less severe disabilities can be on it for years and years and years and years. It's a goal of theirs to make it so there is no waiting list, but currently the waiting list is incredibly long. So get on that if that's what you want for your child. So I'm going to talk about who runs what, because talked about how different programs are run by different administrations or different units of government, and it can get kind of confusing. If something goes wrong, who is it that you need to call? What rules are you supposed to be following? That kind of thing. So the Social Security Administration runs the following programs that I'm going to be talking about today. They run SSI, or Supplemental Security Income. They run SSDI, or Social Security Disability Insurance. And they run Medicare, which is insurance through Social Security. The Social Security Administration runs Supplemental Security Income, which comes with monthly payments based on your wages. And it also, I've got a little asterisk next to Medicaid right here, because when you're on SSI, you're on Medicaid, not Medicare, which is very confusing for a lot of people. However, Medicaid is technically not under the Social Security umbrella. So a lot of people will call Social Security to talk about Medicaid, but they're calling the wrong person. If a person is found incompetent by Social Security, a therapist or a judge if the person is found incompetent by Social Security or a therapist or a judge, they'll be required to have a representative payee. Representative payees take on all of the responsibility for the person who's receiving benefits, including receiving the money, but that money still belongs to the beneficiary. So just because you're a representative payee, especially as like a private parent or someone like that, that doesn't mean that any of the money goes to you. Every dollar of that still has to be spent on the beneficiary. You have to report all changes on behalf of the beneficiary. So changes like marriage, moving, further disability, work, more work, less work, however much money they've made. Most of the time, unless like a major life change is happening, like a move or something, every month you just need to send in someone's pay stubs so that they know exactly how much they're making, because they use the amount of money that they're receiving from their job to determine how much money that Social Security is going to send them. And you also have to fill out a whole bunch of reports. So reports come every year to 3 years. These reports and reviews are to make sure that the beneficiary still needs Social Security, that they're following all the rules, and that there's nothing kind of hokey going on. After having a payee, a person needs a doctor's note to become their own payee. So for instance, we act as payee for quite a few students. If they have a payee and they want to become their own payee, they actually have to get a note from their therapist or doctor saying that that therapist or doctor thinks they're capable of being their payee now. Because at one point, Social Security had to make a designation saying that the beneficiary was not competent of managing things themselves. So it's kind of complicated to switch back to being your own payee or having your student be their own payee, and that's just something to keep in mind if you end up trying to become someone's payee. So I'll cover SSI first. The rules are, there's a maximum of $771 a month in 2019. That is the federal wage, meaning it won't go up and it won't go down in 2019. So last year it was I've already forgotten. I think it was $750 a month. So it went up by $21. So that is called a cost of living adjustment and happens pretty much every year. When you have SSI, you cannot have more than one vehicle, one residence, and $2,000 in assets. Meaning, if Social Security finds that you have more money than that in all of your accounts and everything like that, for as long as you have that kind of asset, that amount of assets over the $2,000 limit, they will not be giving you Social Security money for that month. So I've had students go over by $2, and they're still not going to get their Social Security that month. That happened before they came here, and they actually have. I'll talk about it later. It's kind of a painful mess, but just keep that in mind. They're constantly vigilant. Even if they don't catch you in that month, they can catch you retroactively and take money from you currently to pay for past going over limits. The formula, so the monthly payment figure is based on wages 2 months prior, so that they can get all those wages in and figure it out and have time to get pay stubs, and then figure out that 2 months from then, that's what will be affected. The formula for finding the payment has different rules according to whether the beneficiary is employed or unemployed. And I think I will send out a link with a calculator that helps you figure out how much money you're going to be getting 2 months from now. Beneficiary or representative payee has to report wages and unearned income every month. You need to write the Social Security number of the beneficiary on the pay stub and deliver it by fax, mail, tell them over the phone, or give it to people in person. Failure to report might result in a back payment, or, I'm sorry, I can't read my own slide because I've got you all on the bottom here. That was maybe, okay. Failure to report might result in a back payment or the dreaded overpayment or a cessation of benefits. So the dreaded overpayment is something I do want to talk about real quick.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
You have one question. Does a 401k account or other retirement account count towards the $2,000 maximum other assets?
It sure does. So the money under your bed does, your 401k does, anything that is like CDs, investments, stocks, an ATV that's worth $500. If it's a vehicle that's extra to your main vehicle. So they are talking, I tell people this, and it's not very nice, but if you are on SSI, you are living in poverty. That is the poverty limit. That's what they want you to be at. That's how you can prove that you need it. So, and you can't get help from family and friends without being punished by Social Security. Punished is a wrong word, and I would be in trouble with Social Security for using that word. You would be in trouble, maybe, if you got that. Basically, for every dollar that someone gave you, they would take $1 away. So you might as well not get money from someone else because you're going to be out that dollar anyway, if that makes sense. Does that answer? Okay. So the dreaded overpayment is something I do want to get into because I have had some really terrible overpayments that I've seen in the past. An overpayment is when Social Security gives you more money than they were technically supposed to. So if you didn't report your wages, or even if you did report your wages and Social Security lost them, you can end up owing money back to Social Security. I think the worst overpayment I've seen was a couple years ago, and it was in the $9,000 range. So do your best not to have that become a problem. So Social Security Administration also runs Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. Those are monthly payments based on history, and it comes with Medicaid or Medicare, and sometimes both, which is another complicated thing that I'll get into. I do want to talk about monthly payments based on history. Monthly payments based on history, I mean that, so let's say that I'm under the age of 26, which I'll tell you right now I'm not. If I became disabled, and I had worked since I was 16 or could start working by federal standard laws, I might qualify for SSDI because I had put in enough work quarters into Social Security to draw on the insurance. It's kind of like an insurance policy. If you paid into it enough, you can draw on it. The same thing goes for if a dependent's, whoever the dependent is dependent upon is either deceased, retired, or on disability themselves. So if someone is, so if your child is disabled before the age of 26 and has a parent who is disabled, retired, or deceased, they can get SSDI. SSDI is what's often referred to as the better benefit. And in most ways that's true, because it's kind of, think about it as not the free benefit. You've paid into it, so you can draw on it. So you get Medicaid for the first 24 months of being on SSDI, and I'll talk more about Medicaid later. After 24 months of qualifying for SSDI, you get moved to Medicare. Medicare is generally, it's a different kind of insurance, and it costs money, whereas Medicaid does not. However, you can ask Medicaid to pay for your Medicare, and I think I'll get into that a little later. The SSDI rules are very different from the SSI rules, and that's important to remember. Payment is based on work history of either the beneficiary or the beneficiary's parents or whoever they were dependent on. If they were dependent on their grandparents or a step-parent, it can be based on their work history as well. If a parent is retired, deceased, or on SSDI themselves, the child will receive SSDI, even if they're an adult child. That's what I mean by that. If the person's payments are based on their own history and they continue to work, the payments can go up. So so we have quite a few students here who are on SSDI. They continue to work, and so yearly, even on top of the cost of living adjustment, their SSDI benefits go up. There are no asset rules, so the whole $2,000 asset thing, dismiss it. That doesn't exist with SSDI. However, there are rules about how much you can make. So in 2019, there's an incredibly complicated program called the trial work period, which is essentially that if you are working and you make $880 gross in a month or more, you use up a trial work period month. There are 9 trial work period months. If you use 9 of them within 3 years, even if it's not consecutive, you move into a new territory where you actually risk losing your benefits if you make $1,220 a month. During the trial work period, while you're making over $880 a month, you could make $1 million, and that would only take down 1 trial work period month. So you're doing a bit of a strategy game when you're playing the trial work period. If there are more questions about that later, I can answer them. A note about concurrent beneficiaries. So sometimes a person will qualify for SSDI and SSI. So if a person receives SSDI, and usually if it's on their own work record, they're going to receive less than $771. Sorry, I should have changed this from $750 to $771. Ooh, look at that. Wow. So I have a student who receives $173 every month from SSDI. That's not very much. So they subsidize that SSDI with SSI funds. The SSDI payments change very rarely. They do it based on if a new year is rolling over or if they've continued working, but the money from SSI will fluctuate with their income. So you might receive a steady $100 from SSDI, but an unsteady another amount of money from SSI. And Medicare is still going to kick in after 24 months of being a concurrent beneficiary, because for the most part, all the rules of SSDI are the rules you're trying to follow. However, you do, when you're a concurrent beneficiary, fall under the $2,000 asset limit, because if you go over the $2,000 asset limit, you could still lose your SSI. You'd keep your SSDI steady payment, but your SSI fluctuating payment would go away. Here's a note on ABLE accounts. ABLE accounts are really, really, really amazing. So for a while there, everyone was really concerned about their kids and their family members because they couldn't save past $2,000. So they found something called an ABLE account, which is Achieving a Better Life Experience account. In order to qualify for one, you actually have to have proven your disability, as in being found disabled by Social Security before the age of 26. There's a law that's in the House and the Senate right now that they're trying to pass to bump that age up to 35. For now, there is no ABLE account in Utah. There's supposed to be eventually. You have to open it in another state. I've heard people say Nevada is a good state to open it in. I don't really know. Beneficiary, the family, and friends can contribute money to this account up to $15,000 a year on top of the $2,000 assets. They can be used for just about anything. They need to be qualified disability expenses. So again, you have a card that's kind of like a debit card. There's only a certain amount of money on the debit card. You can swipe it for qualified disability expenses, which improve the livelihood of a disabled individual. So that's food, that's housing, that's cars, that's clothing. Anything that you can argue would improve the livelihood of a disabled individual, except for maybe like a PS4, which they might argue would improve their livelihood, and I might argue could, but it's not going to fly with Social Security. And lastly, unfortunately, I cannot help with these. They involve too much of family finances and things like that, and I just don't feel comfortable stepping into that arena. But I can get you resources on how to start one yourself or find someone who will help you start one with you. Okay, Medicare rules. These are really fun. If you don't know much about Medicare, you might not know that they've I've seen A, B, C, D, E, F, G accounts, parts of Medicare. So it's more complicated than this, but let's just say that there are 4 parts to Medicare. Part A is hospital insurance. If you're hospitalized, you're covered. If you have Part B, that's doctor insurance. If you go to the doctor, you're covered. Doctors mean specialists, therapists, endocrinologists, whatever it is that you need to talk to. C are Advantage plans. There are a lot of Advantage plans that are free, and again, I can't help you with those, but there are resources online that can help you. There are other Advantage plans that are not free that you have to pay for, which I've been told by some people who help people choose Advantage plans with Medicare, that the ones that you pay for are, unless you're able to pay quite a bit, not worth it. Stick with a free Advantage plan, is what they say. I don't really know. And then Part D is prescriptions. Part A and B cost money, but Medicaid can help you pay for Medicare. It can also fill in the gaps of what Medicare won't pay for. Most of our students automatically qualify for assistance with Part D. So they call it automatic, what do they call it? Extra help. They qualify for extra help. And you'll get a letter in the mail, generally, if you qualify for extra help. Once a person has had SSDI for 24 months, they have to move to Medicare. It's a question I get a lot because Medicare does cost money, whereas Medicaid does not. There's nothing that you can do except for to just give up Medicare. It's Now that I'm thinking about it though, there might be a way, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna go see if there are any questions because Ryan Hawks has stepped out of the room. There are no questions, we're good. Okay, Department of Workforce Services. I've talked about them a little bit. They are the ones in charge of Medicaid, what's traditionally known as food stamps, but what they call SNAP, and vocational rehab, or vocational rehabilitation, or as we call it here, voc rehab. There are Medicaid rules, and I think I left a rule off of the Medicaid slide. A person on SSI or who is new to SSDI immediately qualifies through Medicaid through the state. So you have to apply for Medicaid. It's not something that you get automatically upon being granted benefits by Social Security, but you are essentially already qualified for Medicaid if you are on Social Security. A person can get on Medicaid by applying for Medicaid alone. I got some questions about this. The way that you get Medicaid alone is it's just, okay, so I'm a very plain language person sometimes. I call it disabled Medicaid versus poor people Medicaid. And I feel like I can do that because as a child I was on poor people Medicaid. Poor people Medicaid, you just have to be poor. With disabled Medicaid is what they call age blind disabled Medicaid program. It covers more, but you can still get on this poor person Medicaid without proving a disability. Medicaid has no premium. It's all paid for by the state. So your state taxes help pay for Medicaid. Medicaid all comes in one part, so there's none of this A, B, C, D stuff that confuses everyone. Because Medicaid is separate from SSA, it does require its own reports to renew. So Department of Workforce Services, which I have their little thing up here, are the people who are in charge of Medicaid and keep it going for you. If something bad happens and it stops, or your doctor says, hey, we don't take this, even though they took it before, you need to first check your mail, because they probably sent you a report that didn't get filled out. And then secondly, yell at them very nicely. Talking to them with honey gets you a lot because they're used to being yelled at. So they really appreciate it when you talk to them nicely. This Medicaid rule that I left off of this is that your assets for Medicaid also have to be below $2,000. With all the same rules as Social Security, meaning one car doesn't count, one residence doesn't count, but as soon as you start getting like an ATV or a motorcycle or any extra things, just a regular bicycle doesn't count. As soon as you get over $2,000, and they can take Medicaid away for that month. If you make too much money, you might end up paying something called a spend down, but a spend down is still usually a lot less than what you would pay for traditional insurance. So you're going to want to keep paying that spend down. You also have the option of not paying the spend down in a month where you know that you won't need it. So if you know that you go to the doctor or you get prescriptions or you see a therapist every month, you're going to want to pay the spend down every month. But if that's not something that's true for you or your student, then you don't need to pay the spend down every month. So this is my thing where I ask for questions. I've got my contact information up here, and I do actually already have some questions that I'm going to be answering once I find them. And then the housing specialist is Carrie Bushman, and I had her permission to put her phone number up here. If you have questions about housing vouchers and affordable housing here in Utah County, give her a call. She's amazing. She's a very busy woman, and it might take her a couple of days to get back to you. but she knows the ins and outs, and she's an incredibly good advocate as well for getting people into housing that they may otherwise not be able to get into. Do you have them up? I'm just not seeing them.
Probably not.
Okay.
I think about that in advance.
Not me.
And so if you do have questions, feel free to type them in. Or I know some of you did ask questions when you were registering on here. And so either way, so we'll have Sarah go through a couple here, and then if you type them in, I will feed them over to her. Oh, did I call it something? I think I call it something. Webinar. Yay. And so she'll go through some of these that we have. Let's see if we can change. I get to see you again. Oh, there's a person. Hi there. Let's go to. Okay, so now you can see, here's some of the questions that others have asked. If you want to take a look. And once again, feel free to type some questions in if you have additional questions that you don't see here.
So I think that's my water, Brian.
Oh, did I take your water?
Yeah, and I only made a big deal of it because I didn't want you to take a weird swig.
Do you need more water?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the first answer, the first question I think I answered. Interested in learning about Medicaid and benefits from DSPD. Hopefully I told you everything you need to know about Medicaid. Probably didn't. Went over that very shortly. And I don't know very much about DSPD, unfortunately. Most of our students don't qualify for DSPD, which is why I don't know much about it. How do you apply for SSI? That is an incredibly long answer. Essentially what happens is you are applying for SSI with Social Security. The first thing you need to do when you're applying for SSI is gather all your resources. What you're doing when you're applying for either SSI or SSDI, which you actually do at the same time, whether or not you get one or the other is up to them. What you do is you gather evidence. So every time your student got tested by a doctor or by a school or anything like that, you want to gather all of that information. And you actually don't have to gather the reports themselves. What you are doing is gathering the contact information for the person or the institute that did the testing or the seeing of your student, so any doctor's appointments or anything like that. And you're gathering the contact information, and you're figuring out when your student actually saw the doctor. So Social Security is incredibly picky about exact dates, even though I don't think they need to be, but they tend to be. And so when I am putting in an SSI application for a student here, which I do, but there's a waiting list, kind of the story of everyone's life, waiting lists. I am gathering just as much information from parents and from the student themselves as I can, throwing it all together, giving it to Social Security so Social Security can go and track down information. And that's the first step. There are several other steps, but that's probably the most important and work intensive part of it. So another question is a concern about getting health care for someone when they turn 26 in a year. So here's the good news that some parents let out a sigh of relief for and some parents do not. There is a law as of 1 or 2 years ago, maybe 3, I don't know, where you can keep your child if they have a disability on your insurance program. So you have to, I am not involved in that at all, because you have to contact your personal insurance and you have to ask them what you need to do in order to prove that this person has a disability and that by law they can remain on your insurance plan. Other than that, if you have a full-time job and you're making money, for now, I advocate the marketplace for insurance, getting insurance. If you've been following it, I don't know what the fate of the marketplace is going to be, but depending on how much money you make, insurance plans can be quite inexpensive. I was insured through the federal marketplace for about a year, and I think I paid something like $25 a month. That was not me doing a full-time job. When you're at a full-time job, hopefully your employer provides insurance for you that you can, of course, buy into. There is Medicaid, which I talked about. If you can prove disability through Social Security, you can have Medicaid and pay for it even if you're not very poor. However, if you don't have Social Security and therefore have not proven to the government that you have a disability, then you're not going to end up qualifying for Medicaid, most likely. You have to fall into certain percentages of poverty in order for Medicaid to cover you if you are not on Social Security. So someone was talking about how their daughter works and doesn't appear to be eligible for Social Security benefits. Can she still qualify for some Medicaid some other way? Yes, as long as she falls, again, under a certain income limit, she can qualify for what I feel kind of bad about referring to as poor people Medicaid. Because essentially you have to have not a whole lot of money in order to qualify for it. Just because someone works also doesn't mean that they doesn't automatically mean that they do not qualify for Social Security. It's if they work too much or too well. What Social Security looks for when they're making a decision on whether or not to put a person on benefits is that that person works at something called a substantial gainful activity level. Substantial gainful activity level, I believe this year is the $1,220 figure that I gave. If you are earning that or more gross, they have determined that you are making enough money and can make enough money to keep yourself afloat. So even if you're not actually making that amount of money, if they determine that you could make that amount of money, they're also not going to give you Social Security. It's and of course that's what makes applying kind of difficult, is because you have to prove to Social Security in a way that you or the person that you're helping apply is never going to make substantial gainful activity. So that's where I kind of come in and try to help prove that. Someone is retiring for sure in June. Happy for you. It will affect SSI by becoming, instead of SSI, becoming SSDI or becoming a concurrent beneficiary. So I'll go over concurrent beneficiary again a little bit. Concurrent beneficiary being someone who receives SSI and SSDI. So they're on SSDI, they receive SSI as well, because the amount of money they receive in SSDI is lower than $771 a month. So it's good news, just in case we're wondering. So and then if you contact me, I can definitely help guide you through it. It's not something that you have to contact Social Security about. It's something that should happen pretty much instantaneously. I know almost nothing about taxes. So the question is, as parents, is there anything we need to be aware of when doing our taxes with regards to our son or daughter at Scenic View? The only thing that you need to be aware of is Social Security income is, for our students at least, is generally not taxed. I think you have to be receiving a little over $30,000 from Social Security for them to tax Social Security. So they're going to tax what they make it work, but they're not going to tax anything that's coming from Social Security. There's also, because they're going to be insured through those benefits, you don't have to worry about paying the $600 fine at the end of the year that some people have to pay if they couldn't prove insurance. And even if they, honestly, if they weren't insured, they're making so little money that they wouldn't have to pay the fine anyway, because you only have to prove that you have insurance if you make over a certain income level, which I cannot recall right now. If you're working full-time, you probably meet that level, but if you're working part-time, you're most likely not. Next question is how to change payers and handle moving benefits. So I assume that means representative payee. It's relatively simple, but somewhat time-consuming. So when you change payee, what you're doing is you are the beneficiary and the current payee need to kind of be in agreement that this new person or institution are going to become the new payee. So when a student has had a payee at home and is moving here, I basically just send in a request to become payee. They're going to try to get in touch with the current payee and the current student to see if they're okay with that. If they don't put up a fuss or let them know that they're not okay with that, it's going to be changed over pretty instantaneously. And by instantaneously, I mean 1 to 2 months, which in benefits terms is really fast. The only time where it's not that simple is where someone has never had a payee before. I talked before about if a student has had a payee, becoming their own payee means a therapist note. The same goes for if they didn't have a payee before. So I have students that I'm struggling to become payee for now because we're having a hard time getting doctor's notes saying that they do need a payee, or they're actually quite competent and they can be their own payee. They just don't want to be, or it's going to be hard for them. But I kind of have been working with those students to help them be their own payee, because they're definitely not ready to be their own payee right away, but I think I can teach them how. And if I can't, then we'll go further down the process and try to get that letter from a therapist. Moving benefits is as simple as calling the new most local office and letting them know that you have moved to a new state, what your new address is, and all that kind of thing. And then for Medicaid, you're actually going to have to re-sign up for Medicaid in that state. So if you're only moving within state, you don't need to worry about it other than updating your address. If you are moving out of state, so let's say that you're moving from Utah to California, your Utah Medicaid is going to become no longer viable, and you're going to need to get California Medicaid. Talked about affordable housing. So the other thing is when you are receiving disability benefits and you're receiving a housing voucher, you actually cannot, for the most part, have a roommate. So if you want your student to have a place that they can live on their own, that's affordable and doesn't have a roommate, if they get on Social Security benefits, they are pretty much guaranteed to find a place like that.
I would point out that it does say adorable housing.
Yes, it does say adorable housing, which I assume is meant affordable housing, but I can also testify that quite a few of those housing situations are really nice, and I would move into them immediately myself if I could afford them, but without a housing voucher, I cannot, and I don't get a housing voucher. There's a new one. Is there a way to get assistance with medical insurance without being considered disabled? Oh, right. We want to help our son get medical insurance, Medicaid, and still be able to work and not be on government assistance, but he can't get a full-time job that offers medical insurance, so we don't know what to do. So yes, you can get on medical insurance without being considered disabled. It doesn't cover as much. It's not as flexible, but it's definitely good enough for most of our needs. Another thing that I will tell you about is there is something here in Utah County, and there are versions of it in other counties, called Wasatch Mental Health and Mountain Lands. Mountain Lands is the medical clinic and sometimes dental office. Wasatch Mental Health is the therapy portion of all of that. And they are a clinic that charges you based on a sliding scale. So I believe the most anyone pays for a doctor's appointment is $30, and the most anyone pays for a therapist appointment is $15. They also have a pharmacy that is government subsidized, meaning that you end up paying less for your pharmaceuticals there than you would anywhere else. So that is a huge deal. It's kind of how a lot of folks around here make it through needing doctors. The other thing that I would mention is that emergency Medicaid is a thing. There are social workers in hospitals, so heaven forbid someone's in a car accident or they fall off a cliff or some other thing, like their appendix tries to burst or something like that, you can qualify for emergency Medicaid. And emergency Medicaid, I don't know that much about because, again, it's kind of a hospital social worker's expertise and not mine. So there are definitely options. There's also, of course, the federal marketplace when it opens in January, if it opens in January, and that kind of thing that can help with medical insurance when you can't qualify for it in most ways. How long is the waiting list for extra help in getting SSI for my daughter? She applied once and was denied because mother said she declined it and she didn't need it. I have no idea where that came from since I was working so hard to get all the paperwork in. That is a mystery. What they said part is a mystery. A lot of people are denied the first time. There's kind of a myth that goes around saying like you'll always be denied the first time. However, I've helped people apply and gotten them on the first time quite a few times. Much more often than I've had to appeal, thank goodness, because appeals are kind of a pain in the butt. I'm willing to do them, but it's essentially going through the entire process again. So the waiting list is, right now, I have it in order of kind of greatest need. So we have some students here who, if they were out on their butt tomorrow, their parents wouldn't be able to help them, or maybe they don't have parents who could help them out. And then we have other students who would be able to go home for a time and would be okay and could kind of float for a little bit. And that's kind of how I've done my list. I used to do it based on first come, first serve, but I've changed after learning that some people are in more of a lurch than others. So the waiting list, I can't actually tell you how long. I would say, especially because I'm not looking at it, if you contact me privately, I'll probably be able to let you know. How do we get on the list? Contact me privately. So just to let you know a little bit about why the waiting times are so long. So every student that I put in an application for, I first have to gather all the evidence and witness expertise and things that I was talking about before. And then I have to send that into Social Security. Then I have to get Social Security to believe that the person who is applying for Social Security is actually the person that they say they are. And that can mean taking them down to Social Security, which based on Social Security schedule and our student schedules is very difficult. Social Security is only open from 9 until 4 p.m. on weekdays, except for on Wednesday when they're only open until noon. They are closed on holidays and weekends. So I can never take anyone within certain times. So based on student schedule, my schedule, and Social Security schedule, it can take a while to get people down there. Once I get them down there, I wait a couple of weeks, and they send me sometimes more like a couple of months. Kind of depends. As the years have gone on, I've worked here for 2.5 years. The waiting has become worse and worse. So once I get them in there, they send it to something called Disability Determination Services. Disability Determination Services starts reaching out to all those people that we gave contact info for. That includes us. So I start printing off all of our records on your student. So that means case notes, plans, safety plans, testing, psychosocial testing, enrichment testing, and assessments on jobs, assessments on all those things. So I print all of that out, I put it in a giant pile of paper, and I try to mail it. And if I can't fit it in one envelope, I try to fit it in two. And if I can't fit it in two, I try to send I think my record is like a 400-page fax. So that's fun. And so that can take a while. And then once I get all that in, I happen to know that I'm faster than most people at getting that stuff in, because we're also waiting on other places to get their records sent into Disability Determination Services. Disability Determination Services has one examiner. Well, they have multiple examiners, but they assign your student one examiner, and that examiner has to go over every piece of evidence that has been submitted to them. And they have around 6 months to do that. And then more and more, as their funding gets cut and they really don't want to give people Social Security, they then send your student in to see a therapist if the problems and issues and disability are all mentally related. They'll send them to a therapist. If some of them are physically related, then they'll send them to a therapist and a doctor. And they make those appointments 2 to 3 weeks ahead of schedule. So then we have to wait those 2 to 3 weeks for them to go see the doctor. The doctor has to write their report, get it into the person who's making the determination. They have to read that. And then the examiner makes a decision. And if the decision is yes, it's pretty much all done. And I sigh a sigh of relief, and I'm happy. But sometimes their answer is no. I have to regather all the evidence. I have to send it in again, and a different examiner has to look at it. So it can be 6 months. It can be longer than 6 months. And if it doesn't make it in that first appeal, it can be another year to 2 years, because you actually have to go to court with a lawyer and a judge and try to prove that you are disabled in a courtroom. The reason it takes so long when it goes to that is because there's one Social Security disability courthouse in Utah, and the waiting list for that is 1 to 2 years. So when I understand that the wait is almost unbearable, but that is why it takes me so long to get through my list of people that I have to apply for. I have to allow time for me to be able to do all the paperwork, because there are time limits on the paperwork that they send me. I have to allow for time in case I have to appeal it, because I have a time limit on how long I have to appeal it. And so that slows me down a whole lot. And as Social Security has slowed down over the past 2.5 years, so have I, unfortunately. And I have more students now than ever who are on the waiting list than before. Are there any other questions?
I don't see any other questions popping up. So if that's about it, then we'll probably wrap up. I put a couple notes off to the side. Once again, for those that were, do you want to see yourself? For those that were
Hi.
that were late in joining us. This is something that we're hoping to do more often. We'd like to try and do this once a month. So if you have certain things that you have questions about and you received an email from me, feel free to respond to me personally. We'll be trying to take some polls and things. A lot of this is in preparation for our family day, which is coming up at the end of June. I don't have the exact date on that. I apologize. I can try and look at that real quick. But you should be receiving a save the date soon for our family day, in which we'll have some other sessions and things. But we would like to do this more often. So if this is helpful, please let us know, pass information on. Yes, we'll be having, we can make slides available.
Oh, yeah.
Slides will be available, and we'll also have this session up again once the video is done doing its thing. We'll put this up online. If you know others that it would be helpful to share this with, please pass it on. We're totally okay with that as well. This is a way that we get our information out about Scenic View. So thank you for joining us, and let's give Sarah a round of applause.
Thank you.
It's kind of just me. I'll represent all of you. There's my hand.
Thank you, Sarah.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Are we going to email the slides, or do they need to request
I
them?
will email the slides. So you should be receiving an email from Scenic View. Usually comes from Amber. If you don't see that in the next week, I'm going on vacation.
Oh,
Nowhere exciting, really. It's like Cedar City. So
that's exciting.
okay. And so as soon as I can, I will get those to you. There will be an email sent. If you don't hear from me, you can send me an email or email Scenic View in general, and they'll forward it to me so you get that. So.
And if you took down my email, feel free to try to get in touch.
We did.
Also, if you call the front desk, they can transfer you to my phone in my office if you prefer to talk to me that way.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Love you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
She's the
And
bomb.
thank you, Rob.
Sarah. Yeah, she's the bomb.
She is.
Hey,
Thanks,
for
guys.
joining
That was
us.
really
Have a great
helpful.
day.